why do I actually want the goal? What's it going to feel like when I achieve it? If I defined that, how is my life going to be better when I achieve it? What are the things I'm seeing every day? How is that going to change if I achieve it? And creating like an emotional connection to what your goal is. If you don't have that, then I feel like you are going to hit those boring spots and you're going to go, I don't know if I want this anymore. I'm bored. And then you will quit. But if you have the emotional connection to the goal and you really know why you want what you want, if you're connected to that piece of it, you're going to go, I'm bored, but I'm going to keep going. And so I think that's the difference maker. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Grit Meets Growth podcast, where we bring you inspiration and insights focused on getting uncomfortable, making things happen, and creating a magnetic life. If you enjoy the messages you're hearing here, please leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening on, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of the podcast. With that, let's get after it. So I'm gonna kick this off today. You asked the question. This is episode 60. You asked the question, how did we land on episode 60? And the answer was consistency. We just keep showing up and doing it every 2 weeks. Consistency. That's a good topic for today. Consistency.
It is. Consistency is really the way we achieve anything. I can't think of one situation in my life or in goals that I'm seeking to achieve right now that don't involve consistency. Consistency in diet, right? If you think about, if we're getting serious about how we want to be as we age and get older, and that we want to allow for us to continue to move, right? It involves us being fit in the middle of our life. And if that is the goal that we're chasing, then it requires us to have consistency in the food that we eat and the amount of calories that we put in and consume. And the easiest way to do that is to be boring and eat the same stuff on a daily basis. Now, I understand. We got to mix it up every now and again, right? And that's okay. But generally speaking, we want to be consistent with that. We don't need to get fancy in the gym with fancy exercises. We can do the same workout week after week after week after week. And guess what? We'll achieve results. And we'll probably achieve the results that we want to achieve through that consistency.
When you talk about the food bit, my guide in Nepal, this happened when I went last year. It'll be exactly the same this coming year. They eat dal bhat, which is basically rice and then this chickpea. It's like a chickpea gravy that goes over the rice. They have that for breakfast and they have it for dinner. And at dinner time, they'll do some chicken with it or some goat, something like that. And for breakfast, they maybe throw in a hard-boiled egg. But I was talking to my guide, my interpreter, when we were over there. I'm like, so what else do you eat? And he looked at me like I was nuts. He's like, this is what I eat every day. And I think like here in the States, we have so many options. We want it to be exciting. Like I want tacos on Monday night, and then Tuesday night's Italian night, and Wednesday I want jerk chicken or like whatever your deal is, right? I want to have a steak. The more options we have, the more we resist the boring stuff, the consistency, because I don't have to be consistent. I can mix it up as much as I want.
And you know what? You can mix it up, right? You can still mix it up on a weekly basis in that scenario, but still having the same thing. Like every Monday we have this, every Tuesday we have this, Wednesday and structured as such. I think the key with it is this, right? And I think where the real where the real win is in that scenario comes down to trackability, right? And in order to succeed with eating the right amount of calories and hitting the protein, which as we know, right, protein's the most important piece of it all. If we're striving to achieve those things, then tracking is the best way to do that. But I don't know if you've tracked ever. I have. And if you aren't consistent with what you're making and cooking and preparing, it's a royal pain in the ass to track. And quite frankly, it's probably why so many people stop doing it, because it's a pain in the butt. And I know, Kurt at the gym has said, food's just a source of fuel. And I know that's easy to say, but I'm a foodie, man. That doesn't work for me. But we cook almost every meal at home. And by doing so, I'm able to control what we're putting in. And we're pretty consistent about it. Are there times where we go off the reservation? Absolutely. It happens. But for the most part, we're pretty consistent. And that's the key, right? Is consistency the majority of the time.
You use the word structure when you were describing consistency, and it's interesting because I feel like that word gets a bad rap sometimes. Like, I don't want to be too structured. I want it to be free and flowing, and I want to have options, and I just want to be able to make decisions on the fly. Too much structure feels like you're going to box me in. But when I think about that, the areas in my life where I am probably the most successful are the areas where I am a little bit boxed in. My options start to remove a little bit. Like, I can tell you 3 days a week right now where I'm going to be at 6 o'clock in the morning, and there's no option because I'm boxed in. Like, I'm training, I'm doing stuff. I don't have an option. People are counting on me to show up, and I'm consistent with it. And because of that consistency, good things are going to happen on the other side. But it's very structured.
Yeah. And those boxes don't have to be confining. They have to be defining, but they don't have to be confining. Right? They have to have definition to it, but they don't have to hold you. They don't have to be there to hold you back. Right? They're not there to squash you. They're there to help you flourish.
Take that into, like, you and I have both raised kids and have some like kids that turned out pretty well. But like, you think about raising kids, you set rules for kids, right? You set some structure, you set some rules for them so that there's guardrails put into place. Like, if you stay between these guardrails, I'm going to put some rules in place. You follow these rules, you're going to be successful. That's kind of like what we're talking about here.
Like, what happens if you don't do that with kids? What happens?
They go completely off the rails.
Right. If there's no structure, there's no consistency. They're running the show. And as a parent, that's no fun.
But think about that.
It doesn't do them any good for us as parents to do that. We have to provide that structure. Because as we're talking about, here we are at our, late 40s, early 50s, talking about structure. It's important. It's important for kids. It's important for us at this age. It's important as we get older. That structure needs to be there. I mean, listen, my dad's 73 years old. He goes to the gym 3 days a week. The guy's in amazing shape. And he does all the things that he's able to do because of that. It allows him to do all of the activities, the fishing and putting the boat in and out of the water and going and walking around in the woods and, going here, going there, doing this, doing that. I mean, yeah, like, he's a prime example and something that I strive to achieve for sure.
Even taking the bike out, like, you go out there and you ride with them. How many dudes that are 73 years old today had to quit riding when they were 60 because they couldn't pull it off anymore because they weren't being consistent and doing the little things that would keep them on a motorcycle? And that applies to everything. Like, take anything. As we grow older, this consistency conversation becomes more and more important. Like, when you talk about structure, when I was 17, 18, I pushed back against every possible kind of structure, discipline, all of that. I wanted to shut it all down because I thought it was meant to hold me back, to keep me from having fun, and to keep me, probably at that point, I thought it was going to keep me from being successful. Like, the more I pushed back against everything, the better off life was going to be. And you get older and wiser and you realize, like, okay, the discipline, the consistency, the small things that people were telling me, you do this over and over again, something good is going to happen. The returns come. It's like investing $1 a day every day from the time you're 25. Like, the returns will come. You just got to do a little bit at a time.
Yeah. And I think so often we don't allow the time necessary for that consistency and those boring things to really develop. Like, we get bored and we quit. And then we fall right back into the old habits and the old structure that we were trying to change from. And I would challenge you, when those things happen, that's where you keep pushing. That's where the grit comes from, is by keeping going, right? Hitting that wall one more time and keep hitting that wall until it breaks and you're able to get to the other side. That's what we're all striving for, right? As we look at improving our position in life, our health, our fitness, it requires that boring stuff. It requires hitting that wall day in and day out. But I guarantee you're going to hit it one of these days and it's going to come crumbling down. And you're going to look back and go, and look back with pride and go, man, look, I did it. And then keep going. Because guess what? You're going to set another goal and there's going to be another wall in front of you.
It's interesting that you bring up the boring stuff, because I feel like sometimes that point that we hit where we want to quit, if we talk a lot about getting uncomfortable here and doing hard things. I think hard things cause us to quit sometimes. I think uncomfortable things cause us to quit sometimes. But if you were to balance that against boredom, I think boring things, like when I'm bored, if I'm not excited about it anymore, I'm bored with it. I bet I've quit more things because I'm bored than because they're hard.
But my question to you, John, is this. You quit from the boring. Is that because the goal no longer aligned with where you're at? Like, you lost alignment with your goal, or maybe the goal wasn't as clearly defined as it should have been? Because the reality of it is this, and I do want to hear your answer on that front, but the reality of it is this, right? Your discipline comes from setting those solid goals. If you're setting a goal and you really, truly want to achieve that, you will establish the discipline and the motivation to achieve that. But if that goal is not clearly defined and it's not quite right, it's easy to fall off that. I have.
I think it's, you hit on something. It's not clearly defined. I think part of that clear definition is an emotional connection with, why do I actually want the goal? What's it going to feel like when I achieve it? If I defined that, how is my life going to be better when I achieve it? What are the things I'm seeing every day? How is that going to change if I achieve it? And creating like an emotional connection to what your goal is. If you don't have that, then I feel like you are going to hit those boring spots and you're going to go, I don't know if I want this anymore. I'm bored. And then you will quit. But if you have the emotional connection to the goal and you really know why you want what you want, if you're connected to that piece of it, you're going to go, I'm bored, but I'm going to keep going. So I think that's a difference maker.
For sure. Let's talk about your Nepal trip, right?
Yeah.
The reason you go climb the hill every day here in preparation for that is so that you don't get left behind when you're on the mountain, right? Last thing you want to do is be the last guy struggling, gasping for air, inability to climb. That goal is pretty clearly defined for you. And I'm sure it's boring as hell to go climb Highland every day. But guess what? You do it because you've got a clear definition of what you want to achieve.
And it's not only like you take the emotional piece of that emotional connection to it. It's not only I don't want to be last, because my ego gets involved and I'm one of the older guys on this trip. I don't want to be last. I'm all about that. But I know that if there's another guy on this trip that needs help, I want to be prepared to help any guy that I'm traveling with, whether it's one of my guys from here, whether it's one of my Nepali guides that are going to help us. If something goes south, something goes sideways, someone needs help, I want to be the guy who's able to help. I don't want to have to stand by and watch. And so that fires things up as well. But it is, that work on the hill sucks. It's boring. The only thing that makes it not boring is when you do it with a group of guys and you're having conversations and you're doing it together. And I think that's something on the boring side. If you've got stuff that you have to do that you're bored with, maybe it's because you're doing it by yourself. Maybe it would be less boring if you had somebody to help you with it or somebody to do it alongside. That would solve boring. Like, it'd be a big difference.
Yeah. I think you hit on something too that triggered for me, and that is emotional connection to your goals. So not only having clearly defined goals, but really creating goals that you have an emotional connection to. And it may not be that connection when you start, when you write that goal down and define it, but you damn well better get there.
We've talked about it. Like, say your goal is to make some certain amount of money. If your goal is just to make a certain amount of money, you're probably not going to achieve it. But if you connect that to what you're going to do with the money is a tool. I'm going to use the tool for a family vacation because that's what matters to me, is that family vacation. Now I'll hustle and grind for my family at a whole different level than if it was just to make $100 or like whatever your number is, like whatever that. It's got to be something more than just the thing you're going to get. There's got to be that deeper connection to it.
Right.
So what do you do when things get boring? What do you do when you want to tap out? What do you do when it's the hard work and you just want to be done, but you know that the consistent thing has to get done? Like, because we all have that moment. We all have that moment where I don't feel like it today. We've talked about it in the past. I don't feel like getting out of bed this morning. I don't feel like making a good decision on my food. I don't feel like reading the book, whatever it is that you're working on right now. Like, how do you battle that?
Yeah, for me, and trust me, I'm struggling with some of that right now and have been, for a while. But it's really going back to what those clearly defined non-negotiables were. And, it's okay to pivot and change. So I'll give you an example, right? My workouts, like I was consistent in the gym 5 days a week. I've struggled to make that 5 days a week consistency right now. Things have kind of changed over the last few months, but it doesn't mean that I'm still not getting exercise, right? I'm still, even though I'm not going to the gym 5 days a week, I've pivoted to create a different approach, right? Whether I'm, working in a little more Peloton ride, whether I'm walking outside, and doing some stretching and some calisthenics and those types of things at home versus going to the gym. It's not the same as what I was doing, but I'm still doing something. And I'm still making it to the gym a couple, 2-3 times a week. Just as an example, right? We all tend to drift off of things, but it's about pivoting and putting us in a position where we're still working towards the things and working towards the goal. You know, does that make sense?
100%. And you used one of my favorite terms, which is non-negotiable. Like, I think that's one piece that fits into this conversation is the non-negotiables. Like, if you can define what's non-negotiable for you, like, this is the line I won't cross. This is what I'm not willing to accept. This is what matters to me, no matter what else. Those things I think are really important. Because it's not only what do I want, but what am I not willing to accept? I think those two go hand in hand, and understanding how they go hand in hand, how they fit together in your own life. It's going to be different for everybody, but you got to define, here's what I want, here's what I won't accept. Those are two big things for everybody.
Yeah. And I'm, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a foodie. So the whole food thing, right? In summertime, and you know, what you have as summertime foods, what takes you back and memories jogged as a kid. And I kind of get sucked down those rabbit holes time and, you know, from here and there. Right. And the key with it is just to not get hung up on, okay, I went off the radar today with my food, right? I ate too much. I ate too much junk. I drank too many beers, whatever it happens to be. Just knowing that the next day you're going to get back on track and you're going to get things straight. Right? It's about getting back on the tracks, and it's about not beating yourself up about the fact that you've failed, right? I failed yesterday. I went down to the Kolachki festival down in Montgomery. I failed. It's all right. I'm going to dust off. I'm going to stand back up, and I'm going to get back on the tracks, man.
That's I think where the non-negotiables flip in for me is it's not necessarily that they're going to keep me from going down in the ditch completely, but the non-negotiables are what let me know when I'm in the ditch. Hey, dude, you're in the ditch. Rip yourself back up, stand back up, get back on track. That's I think where they come into play. It's easy to think about non-negotiables like I'm never going to do this. Well, that's never going to happen. That doesn't work.
And allow yourself, be okay. Failure is okay, right? Somehow we've come up with this concept along the way that failure's bad. Like, failure's not bad. It happens. Failure, we could go into a whole conversation about failure and how, you know, failure can be a driver for success. I mean, it doesn't take much to look at examples in pro sports of folks that have failed at some point early in their careers. And it was the driving force that created them into these amazing athletes. It happens. The key is to not let that failure be consistent, to brush that failure aside, be comfortable with it, that it happened, and get back on your consistency of success. Don't let don't let those failures carry on for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. Like, let it happen, be okay with it, and move on.
That's a key right there, because from a consistency standpoint, like, I'm on track 5 days, I get off 1 day. If I let that 1 day off track turn into 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, now I've created a whole different kind of consistency. Whereas if I get off track for a day, maybe 2 days, but I get back on track as fast as I possibly can, now I'm back to the good kind of consistent. Consistency right. Can go both ways. You can be consistently showing up at a high level or consistently at a low level, and making sure you're hanging in the right area, the right lane on that is a big deal. So, and part of it's just awareness. You have to continue to ask yourself, hey, from a consistency standpoint, what am I doing well? What am I not? Like I got into a habit probably a month ago of consistently grabbing snacks at like 10 o'clock at night. And it was because I was bored and I was stressed. And over time, I was aware enough to go, okay, here's what you're consistently starting to do. You don't say you don't want to do it, make some tweaks and get back on track. But it's the awareness piece, I think, is huge. You got to be willing to ask yourself some hard questions. As you're talking about consistency, you can't lie to yourself. You got to just ask some hard questions and go like, where am I really at? And then make some adjustments.
Listen, people, if you're struggling with it, reach out to DM one of us, reach out to your circle. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Sometimes all it requires is conversation. Sometimes it's just that dialogue that kicks you in the ass and gets you back in gear.
You got to be willing to ask. It takes some humility, and it takes usually a little bit of dirt on your knees and scun up elbows to get there.
Yeah, but dude, if you're surrounding yourself with the right people and you've got the right friends and the right people in your circle to go through this thing we call life, that conversation shouldn't be that difficult.
Agreed.
So here's what we're going to do. Go out there, get after it, and make it a great day.
Consistently good conversations, man.
Right on.
Thanks for this one. See you later. That wraps it up for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being part of the Grit Meets Growth tribe. And thanks for growing along with us and being part of this journey together. If you know someone who needs to hear the conversation we had today, please share it. If you got something out of this conversation, please leave us a review. And finally, if you want to make sure you don't miss future episodes, just remember to subscribe. We're thankful for each and every one of you. And as my co-host and good friend Chris Cathers always says, make it a great day.